Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for having me. I like spending a few moments just looking at the faces of those of you who are willing to share your faith with me. Um, we're still new in a digital world, right? We've gotten used to some of this, particularly through COVID, but it's still amazing that we can create a community instantaneously. And I like seeing where people are choosing to do this work from, because it actually connects to what I want to share with you through the prism of this week's Torah, that whether you're in your kitchen or you're in your office or perhaps even in your car, although not driving, what we're about to experience ought to be accessible anywhere, anytime, which is a paradox because so many people find spirituality within Judaism to be inaccessible. And yet, those of us who have cultivated and curated a mindfulness practice, even if we don't always do it often or well enough, we do know the deep wisdom that it's always there. It's not that far away. And that the challenge of accessing it is internal, not something about um, the systemic challenge. I love how Rabbi Mark said that this is an opportunity for a few minutes of Shabbat in the midst of a week. And in this Shabbat, we're going to be reading from Parshat Shuma. And in the meditations that I lead for my community, I almost always connect it to something hanging out in the season and in our ancient texts. And in Parshat Shuma, as the Torah talks about the construction of the Mishkan, the traveling tabernacle, and the specifics of all the appurtenances, all of the instruments and furniture and adornments in the Mishkan, someone notices a very interesting oddity. In nearly every instruction given to build the Mishkan, particularly the things in the Mishkan, the verbs used are singular. Va'asita, va'asita, va'asita. You individually should make this. You individually should make that. In Hebrew, as in French, but not necessarily in English, there's a different you for one person and a different you for many people. Every single one is in the first person, in the singular, except for one. When the Torah talks about the building of the Aron, the ark, the receptacle of our holiest um, fragments of God's sanctity, the Torah says, "Va'asu et ha'aron," plural. They will make the ark. And on that difference, the Chafetz Chaim, who was a great ethicist and halachist in the late 19th, early 20th century Poland. Some people believe that when he died, he was the most renowned Jew alive because of his influence on so much of both religious Jewry and cultural Jewry. He says, why does the Aron, the ark, get a plural when everything else gets a singular? It's a Musar Heskel. It's an ethical teaching for the Jewish people. Lest anyone ever be able to say, have a pitchon peh, have an opening to be able to say, since I'm the one who built this ark, or since I'm the one who contributed more to this ark, I have more access to it. I have more control over it. I have more of a relationship with it. It says there's no hierarchy when it comes to accessing the spiritual core power of the Jewish people and of God's presence on earth. Everyone has equal access to that battery. It's a wonderful teaching, belied by so much of Jewish life. It's belied by sometimes the financial obstacles in Jewish life, where we are sadly aware that not everyone has access to all these wonderful things. And it's belied by the gaps that we, the educators, have. It's our fault in not communicating to the entire Jewish people that this beauty, this treasure of Jewish life, Jewish ritual, Jewish meaning making is really something that can be accessible to everyone. And so every time we have an opportunity to bring the Aron, and there's something Aronish about this moment, to anyone who's interested, we are living out the teaching and the exhortation of the Chafetz Chaim. So we don't really know each other, although I might know some of you by happenstance. I don't know your backgrounds. I don't know your educations. I don't know when or how or if you go to shul. It doesn't matter. If you're here to connect to the core battery of Jewish spiritual presence, it's there for you. The Aron is waiting for you. And I'm going to invite us all into that Aron, into that ark, and see what of it and what of ourselves we find within it. If you haven't already, I invite you to close your eyes. And even if you don't adjust your position so much, assume your position with a certain kavanah, a certain intentionality. You might not need more muscle twitches to get you into the position you want to be in, but claim it as if you sat this way for a reason and not by accident. I invite you to place your hands on your legs, either palms up, which is a stance of openness to the world and to this moment, or palms down, which is a gentle embrace of self. And place your feet flat on the ground in front of you so you have full contact with Mother Earth and actually feel gravity rather than just know that it is there. And as you feel the luxurious parts of gravity, the hugging, the sagging, and the weighing down, as if all of the earth were some gentle cushion, see if you can also feel the opposite simultaneously, that you are not substance but all air. You live in a wispy realm. You float, you soar, you fly. I invite you to take a series of deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And because our minds wander so easily, you may want to hear your own voice inside your head say these words as you inhale and exhale. I know that I am breathing in. I know that I am breathing out. I know that I am breathing in. I know that I am breathing out. That extra awareness that turns the automatic into the intentional. Let's see if you can imagine yourself tiptoeing towards being pulled in by breathing into the Aron, the ark of sanctity, where God's spiritual power is most intense. You have the same claim on it as every Jew alive, every person alive. You have the same access to it as anyone else that you know. The instruction to build it was given also to you. Build the Aron in this moment. Build your Aron in this moment. Asuni Mikdash Veshachanti Betocham Veyasuni Mikdash Veshachanti Betocham Veyasuni Mikdash Veshachanti Betocham Veyasuni Mikdash Veshachanti Betocham Yananai Yararai Yararanai Yararanai Yaranai Yaranai Yararai ay, 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 ay. When you're ready, you can open your eyes, come to the surface, start to resist some of the gravity from below and the pull from the heavens above, and see who you are and how you are as you come back to this moment. Shalom and namaste. Thank
you so much, Rabbi Adam. Always so beautiful. And friends, we seal the practice as we do each day by offering an opportunity for those of you who are in mourning, observing a yard site, accustomed to joining the mourner's Kaddish, you're welcome to do so. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, we really encourage you to stay present for a few moments to support those who are, for your compassionate support in their time of loss. You can put the name or names of those you're honoring in the chat now or after you recite Kaddish. And if you're joining me, please do so by rising in body or in spirit. And you can unmute at this time. Yitgadal, Yitgadash, Shemei Rabbah, Yalma Divra, Kivite, Yamlich, Malchute,
Chaye
Kayekon,
Yechon,
Yamekon,
Uvyomechon,
Kaye
Uvchaye
Dechol,
Techol, Beit
Israel,
Israel. Ba'agala,
Ba'agala, Ubizman,
Ubizman,
Kariv,
Kariv,
Ivru,
Ivru,
Amen.
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 Yehi Shmei
Shmei
Rabba
Rabba,
Mevarach,
Mevorach,
Le'olam,
Le'olam,
Amaya.
Amen, Olmaya. Yitbarach
v'yishtabach
v'yishtabach
v'yitbar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yithalal shmei tefusha v'rochu Leila min kol brachata shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amran ba'alma v'imru amen. Ihe shlamay min shmaya v'chaim anenu ar kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Ose shalom v'imromav v'yaseh Aleinu var kol Yisrael var kol yashvei taveh v'imru amen.
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 Margaret. Well,
Friends, thanks for joining us today. If you're leaving us, we hope you'll join us tomorrow. Kohenik Shir Halep Life will be leading us in practice on Thursday. Rabbi Mira Nicolescu will be leading us. And on Friday, which is Rosh Chodesh Adar, as always, Sarah Waxman of At the Well will lead us to set into Shabbat and also to collectively enter into the month of Adar. And I want to thank Rachel Huget for holding our text space today, as always. Also want to share, which I didn't at the beginning, that Rabbi Adam offers a meditation through his congregation, Temple Beth Am in LA, every Friday at 8:15 a.m. Pacific time. That's 11:15 a.m. Eastern time. And just put the link in the chat that has the Zoom information. If you can join, that happens weekly on Fridays, right, Adam?
correct.
Okay. Kol hakavod, Judith, that was really beautiful, and I see a lot of appreciation in the chat, Adam. Thank you so much. And it was actually a beautiful kind of compliment to Rabbi Jenny Solomon's teaching and practice yesterday, which focused on the Mishkan, and also she ended with chanting of that line from the Parsha, Suvi Mikdash. So I was a beautiful compliment, because yesterday the focus was on the collective creation of the Mikdash, and today was on the collective engagement with the Aron, with the Ark, and that felt like it added something to it, because I don't remember exactly the phrase used, but maybe you can come back. We'll come back to you. But something about what the Aron, what the Ark represents as distinct from the Mikdash. It's at the heart of the Mikdash. I mean, it literally is the heart of the Mikdash. Do you remember how you described it? Like what that represents in terms of all having a part in it?
Yeah, the core spiritual power, or the core spiritual battery of our people, which
That was it, the battery. I love that.
might be projection. Like I don't know how they saw it then, right? Then it was sort of a receptacle for holy items. I don't know if they also understood it as the place from which God's transcendent power mostly emanated. I don't know if they saw that on the altar rather than the Aron, but um, I'm choosing, and I think the Chaim was choosing to say this is the tesseract, right? This is where it all emanates from, and everyone ought to feel responsible for it and have access to it.
Would you say, like, would you differentiate between that and the Mishkan as a whole, or would you say like that's especially true for the Aron?
I mean, for the purpose of the teaching I just gave, I would say it's especially true, right? It might be, we might be playing a little bit loose with the spiritual geography of the Mishkan, right? Because from the perspective of Jewish practice and Jewish law, it was the Holy of Holies itself that we didn't have access to. That was a spiritual core. So it's kind of an inversion of that, right? So on Yom Kippur, we're reminded that we actually don't have access to the thing that is at the apex of the spiritual mountain range. But the Chafetz Chaim was saying, no, there's something in the verse that says there's something else that can also operate as that epicenter, and everyone has to build it. So maybe that's a tension that's worth thinking about as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was the phrase that hit me. The battery. I was sort of picturing everybody connecting their wire, to the battery in some way, and that was actually very helpful. And I realized I don't want to intellectualize this. I really want to keep this grounded in our actual experience. And I was also appreciative how what you observed about the nature of this particular gathering, right? The virtual gatherings where we have people, for the most part, by individually, often our own spaces, and yet doing something collectively. And it's both an individual experience, but also a collective experience. And we're reminded of that when we look at the gallery view or when we see the names there, and I think we're part of that is essentially the same as, being part of a minyan. And so what that brought up for me was the spiritual paradox of individuality and community in Judaism. How to hold, that we have a tradition that really lifts up the sanctity of each individual. And that comes up in this parsha too, about how each individual had something unique to contribute, right? Or unique take. We get that at Mount Sinai too, where each person hears the voice in its, in our own unique way, before it gets filtered through our own experience. So there's this absolute, sanctity of the uniqueness. No person is like any other. And yet we're all subsumed within the collective whole as well. So I just wanted to invite you, if you wanted to riff on that a little bit, about like what, because it goes to our experience here, sitting here, experiencing ourselves both in our unique individuality and as part of, kind of melding into something larger than ourselves.
Thank you for that question. I also think we're all built differently. Our own spiritual needs and instincts are different. I do sometimes think about in my own life and in my pastoral work as I'm trying to connect with other people's reality and pain, that no matter what we share with someone else, a friend, a spouse, a rabbi, or a psychotherapist, when we go to sleep, it's only our heads on our pillow, and no one can get in there with us. And there's something in some ways wonderful about that, that there are zones that no one has access to, but there can be a profound loneliness to this, that no matter how much we share with others, there's a part of our reality, in fact, an enormous amount of our reality that's just us. I think that prayer and synagogue life can it can be mapped onto that, right? There are some people who pray much better when they are alone, and there's some people who pray much better when they're not alone. I'm in the second category, but there's an asterisk. I pray much better in almost any minyan in the world than by myself, except if I'm in a minyan where no one's praying,
Hmm.
right? So you plot me into, a renewal, a reconstructionist, a reform, a conservative, a young Israel. For 9 years, I was a rabbi in a small shul in upstate New York, and the minyan I went to, because we were too small to have a daily minyan in our synagogue, was a Satmar Hasidic minyan, because there were 15,000 Satmar Hasidim in the town where I was living. And that was almost always better for me than just putting on my tefillin in my living room and trying to pray. But when I'm plugging into something that ought to be communal, and my experience of it is that everyone is distracted and not focusing on the battery, that's worse than praying by myself. So I think there's a delicateness there. And again, I know there are many people who feel the opposite. I know a lot of people who are very much dedicated to their davening life, for whom minyan is not so significant. What's significant is them wrapped in their talit wherever it takes them. So I also know there are differences amongst us.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thanks for sharing that. I see a question from Karen. By the way, I forgot to mention, of course, for those who are usually here, you know this. If you have a question you want to raise, just put it in the chat and write question all in caps. Karen's asking, is the battery charging both ways? Individual charging the battery and battery charging individuals. I had a dead car battery today, so this is actually a very live question for me.
I'd like to think so, right? We don't have, there's nothing to trace like how much battery is left, like in my Honda Clarity, where I know how many miles I have left. I don't know. I know when I press on the brake in my car, I'm recharging the battery. There's no monitor to let me know how much my spiritual practice is contributing to the recharging of the battery of Jewish life or Jewish spiritual life.
Right.
But I'd like to live ki'ilu. Like I once gave a high holiday sermon on ki'iluism. Ki'ilu means as if, that there are certain things we do not to delude ourselves, but to lean into the possibility, the as if something we're going to be directly impacted by our actions, right? Because we don't know that it's not the case, and it allows us to live with a little bit of spiritual or majestic aspiration. So I'd like to think that every time I meditate, every time I am engaged in mindfulness, I am recharging the spiritual reservoirs of, if I can sound so highfalutin, humanity, right? The universe, right?
Mhm.
And certainly when I do it when I feel that when our community comes together for a particularly wonderful prayer experience or mindfulness experience, the ether around us is more beautiful as a result. Can I prove it? No, but that's why we're engaged in faith and not science.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. It does bring, I know like at your congregation, you do an annual kala or, program on prayer, which leads me to ask you the question about the connection for you between meditation and prayer, since you were making the connection between our practice and minyan as well. So,
Yeah.
what would you say about that for yourself?
I think it's going to sound like a tautology, but I know that I'm praying well when I experience moments of true mindfulness somewhere within the Amidah, and it doesn't always happen. And I know that I'm mindfulnessing well when I'm done with it and I feel like I've prayed.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm too conscious of it, it kind of ruins it's like breaking the fourth wall, right? Like if I'm in the middle of a meditation and I try to convert it into a prayer, it somehow undoes the power. And if I try too hard to turn my Amidah into a meditative sit, I ruin the ritual. But somehow I'm also aiming for it, even though I'm not trying to overly direct it. And it's very delicate, right? It's like a blowing a balloon with soapy water, right? Like it builds this beautiful sphere and it's iridescent and you want to stare at it. And the tiniest touch will pop the entire thing, not just perforate it, but the whole thing. And I find that my prayer practice and my spiritual practice and my mindfulness practice is like that. Sometimes I'm able to behold the beauty of it, but too much holding of it or too much awareness of it, and it's gone. Um, yeah.
Thank you for that. Pauline's asking that access was available at the making stage of the ark in this parsha, but not after it was sanctified, which is interesting, right? There was, the priestly class had access to it, but the people did not. What do you make of that in terms of how we apply this?
It's a timely question for me. This I don't mean for this sentence to sound like a thud, but I'm reading a book about Jesus right now. I'm reading Riza Aslan's book Zealot about this, I think it's called a spiritual biography of Jesus of Nazareth. And what he's trying to do in the book is write not about Jesus, whom some people consider to be the Messiah, the Christ, but to the extent that we can find out who the person was and what life in the Galilee was for this person and what his Jewish experience was um, and how he experienced God and spirituality. And first of all, in some ways, it's really just a book about first century land of Israel, which is fascinating for me. Um, but it is a pretty intense screed against the extent to which, by the time the Second Temple was at the verge of being destroyed, how corrupt, broken, hierarchical it was, and how much of the spiritual power was overly controlled by the functionaries, by the Kohanim, um, and that the experience of the average Jew may not have been one where he or she felt like they had access to that battery, which
Mhm.
is why maybe another religion, you know, kind of emerged organically from it. That's a gross simplification of that era, but maybe not too gross, right? That's the people felt like they didn't have access to that Aron that the Chafetz Chaim 2,000 years later was going to say they had such responsibility for. And I take that burden seriously and know that I don't always get it right. I try very hard as a spiritual leader to make our own and our bima and our sanctuary one where we are curating experience, but we're not mediating it. We want people to have their own experience, and I don't always score myself an A, but I know it's a really important challenge of a spiritual leader.
Can you share that book, the name of the book again,
It's called
Adam?
it's called Zealot.
Mhm.
I'll put it in the
In the chat? That'd be great. I think people will be very interested in that. That's such a very interesting theory you got there. Um, uh,
a really
well,
fun book for the rabbi to bring into minyan to like be, reading in between, while the repetition of the Amidah happens. And some people are reading a Mishnah and some people are whatever, and I'm reading a book about Jesus. But
well, It's call like a vote on that too, I think. So, in the couple of minutes we have, actually, the one other thing that came up for me around the imagery of the Aron and the Ark is the tradition that both the broken and whole tablets, the Talmud has this beautiful passage that it contained both, just to skip ahead in the story a little bit, the broken and whole tablets in the Ark. And so, you want to add anything about that in terms of how that figures in about, because we can imagine each of ourselves as well, in Jewish mystical tradition, the Hasidic tradition, as holding both the broken and the whole within ourselves as well.
Sure, many people know, if not word for word, the concept of the Kutzker Rebbe's teaching, Ein davar yoter shalem milev shavur. There's nothing more whole than a broken heart. A song that Naomi Shemer wrote a beautiful song to. I'm in terms of the very specific things that I'm dealing with. Adam Kligfeld, in this moment, it's very raw for me because until midnight last night, and where I'm going right after this is to the hospital to be with a Carnegie who's at the very, very edge of her life, and to hold the family's brokenness as they confront it. And as Rabbi Mark said before, something that I'm also confronting is my father passed away in December, and you obviously don't wish those moments on anyone, although we have to confront them. But I sometimes feel like the praying I do at someone's dying bedside is the holiest prayers that I offer, that I induce, that I participate in, because as we are standing next to that Aron, inside some of those tablets are broken, and sometimes it's harder to access the prayer of joy. I think Jews are sometimes a little embarrassed to exult in prayer, like embarrassed to really let go in simcha sometimes in some communities, but somehow when there's brokenness, the crevice created by that brokenness allows for more prayerfulness. So yes, I'd like to think that every time we approach the Aron, depending on how you want to play with the metaphor, we are in the presence of the wholeness and the brokenness of the world, or we are offering the wholeness and the brokenness of ourselves. And certainly Judaism has what to teach us and offer us and give us when it's our own heart, not just the tablets that are shattered.
Adam, thank you for connecting us so beautifully today to that, the source of that energy, collectively. And as you mentioned, I know you're in the year of Avelut for your dad. Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be a blessing for you. And we're, on behalf of everyone here, we want to offer our comfort and support for you in your year of mourning for him, and hope that his neshama has an aliyah, that it ascends, and that it continues to light your way in your life, the life of your family and everyone. Right. And add a mazal tov as well. That's bar mitzvah this past Shabbat. You're holding it all. And thanks so much for your honesty and vulnerability too, afterwards. We all deeply appreciate that. All right, Rachel, thank you so much for holding us together. Thanks everyone for being here. I hope to see you tomorrow for practice with Kashir Halef 5, everyone. Have a good day. Be safe and well. Many blessings.